Hello, everybody. As I've been introduced, I'm Jill Pay, and I'm delighted to talk to you today as founder of the Gender Index. But there is a subtext going through all this talk, and that subtext is gender disaggregated data. So just hold on to that in the back of your mind. As well as the Gender Index, I'm chairman of trustees of Coram Beanstalk, which is a literacy charity, and we support children in primary school who struggle to learn to read. And I'm a volunteer reading helper in a school in Battersea, and I've actually come hot foot from there this morning, where I've been reading with my 3 children, which is a great way to start the day. I'm chairman of the Savitas Global Senate, which is a global network for women, and I will talk a bit more about that later. And I'm a non-exec director of M&A Tech, and M&A Tech is the data platform that powers the Gender Index. And I'm really pleased to see some of the M&A team on the call today. Hello, it's lovely to have you here with us. But I've been asked to talk to you about my extraordinary business journey. Now, it doesn't seem at all extraordinary to me because I've been beside me on the path, but anyway, here goes. My background is business management. And for the first 10 years, I worked in a large London advertising agency called Ogilvy & Mather. During that time, I got married, and I left a very exciting 24/7 job about 4 weeks before I had my first daughter. And I was sort of not working what I call seriously for 3 years. I had another daughter in that time, and I did work for my father and got involved in various community groups. And then when I went back to what I call a proper job, very part-time to begin with, but very full-time as it went on, that was in the private medical sector. And I worked for a consultant who had consulting rooms in Harley Street, South Kensington, Birmingham. He had properties all over the UK, had a few ex-wives all over the UK, a few offshore bank accounts. So I juggled all the business side of his practice for him. And sadly, I had to leave there when my parents became sick, and I needed to be nearby for them and not in London or traveling around the UK. And that was when I first started work in the public sector. And it was an employment and education department project called TVEI, which was the Technical and Vocational Education Initiative. And we had an enterprise technology centre. And the point of the project was to give students good experience of work and business, so that when they left school or college, they were what business wanted rather than what schools thought business wanted. And there's a great difference between the two, believe me. But the point about that was that in this Enterprise Technology Centre, we really had leading edge technology, had Apple Mac computers everywhere, colour printers, video conferencing facilities to talk to colleges all around Europe. And this was in the 1990s. So it really was state-of-the-art technology at that time. And that was a project that was funded for 7 years. And when I left there, I went to my first job in the House of Commons. And my job title was very archaic. It was head office keeper. And there's quite a lot in the House of Commons that's archaic, I expect you've noticed. But in our terms, that would be called the facilities manager. So all the things I'd done in the previous parts of my career, managing estates, managing finance, project management, the technology, the customer service, the writing skills I picked up in advertising, all of that came together and got me my first job in the House of Commons. And I managed about 150 staff who delivered all the frontline services to members and their staff across the parliamentary estate. But actually, it was about change management. It was about changing the culture and the behaviour of this big department to try and drag it into the 20th century. And I think over 5 years, I did achieve that. And they were much more customer focused, and I was able to develop the managers with potential. So there was a little more inspiration there than there'd been beforehand. My next challenge was to open Portcullis House, which is the newest parliamentary building. And that's on the same side of the river as the Houses of Parliament, but just across Westminster Bridge on the corner there. And in Portcullis House, there is a lot of technical security. So for about 18 months before we opened the building, I was working with the architects, the technical guys, the security guys, and getting all these discrete technical systems into the building to make it safe without having to have too much security around there. So it was a very, very exciting project. And I worked very long hours and very hard. And then I did various other things. But my last role in the House of Commons was to be the Sergeant at Arms. And I was the first woman appointed to that post in 600 years. And if you look in the chat, Natalie's put a photograph in there of me done up in all my uniform and all the bling for the state opening of Parliament. I had the glam squad in that day, I can assure you. But if you look at the photograph, you'll see that I'm carrying the gold mace on my shoulder. But I carried that every day in the procession from the Speaker's office, leading the Speaker down to the chamber and putting that mace on the table. And the mace is the symbol of the monarch, by the way, and putting the mace on the table so that the House of Commons was in session. But that was the visible part of the job. 80% of the job was security. So I was responsible for the security of the 3,500 people who work on the estate and the 1 million visitors a year. And that was quite a heavy burden. And I introduced a lot of technical security. And the chief part of that was a contactless access control system, which in Parliament was quite revolutionary. And it wasn't too difficult to install it in a new building like Portcullis House, but you can imagine the challenges of installing a contactless access control system in the Gothic Palace of Westminster. But I had a very good contractor who worked for me to do that, and we did achieve it, and it did transform the security of Parliament. While I was in the House, I was also involved in this Business Women's Network, which was called Pink Shoe to begin with, and it was for senior women in Parliament and in Whitehall who needed a network. So it's very lonely when you're a woman in a top job, and those of you who run your own businesses will know this. So I do encourage you to develop your network and get a mentor. The two things I always say to women and men who I'm mentoring is get a good network and get a mentor. I don't think you can run a business successfully without either of them. And it's now Savitas Global, as I mentioned earlier, and we support women entrepreneurs and business owners throughout their careers from startup to high growth. And because of COVID, we've actually gone and run all our events online, and we've very, very quickly become this international global organization with women from countries all over the world joining us. And we recently had, we call it World Business Women Caucus. We recently had a caucus that the report was presented at COP26. And our idea, which you may hear about, is to have a kite mark for sustainable businesses that would be run through an app. So just watch this space. I've given them the aim to launch it at COP27. So we'll see what happens with that. So 4 years of being the Sergeant at Arms, really shouldering that huge security burden was enough. And I wanted to leave that role still with energy and enthusiasm to do other things. So I needed to work out what was going to inspire me, what was going to motivate me to get energized and active. And after a lot of thought and conversations with people, I came down to this, that my three passions are supporting children, women, and small businesses to grow, develop, and thrive. So everything I do comes under that umbrella of supporting children and women and small businesses. And I think you'll start to see how all this is actually coming together. The first small business I supported was the contractor who'd installed or designed and installed the access control system. They're called Time and Data Solutions, and they're based in Dublin. And they'd seen what I'd done in the House of Commons through change management. And their business was growing, but they weren't developing the people in the business. So their great ideas were up here, but the people were still at a different level. So I worked with them for 3 years to turn the business around, bring about the change that was needed. And I helped them grow the company from a UK base to international markets. And I think the greatest achievement was that we got their visitor management and access control systems into every Google office in the world. So that was quite a big tick. I also became involved in other things. One is that I'm a member of the all-party parliamentary group on women in enterprise. And these are groups that are made up of members and peers and business members, of which I'm one, with a special interest. And this one is all about women in enterprise. So there's about 35 members who are either women business owners or they're advocates for female entrepreneurs. And there's some men in there as well, because we don't believe you can achieve it if you try and do it women only. You need the men beside you. And it's chaired by a very brave MP called Craig Tracy, who hosts these meetings with all these women. But in that group, I lead on data. So there's a data work stream, and I lead on data for that group. Through Savitas, and sponsored by NatWest, I led a program of economic blueprint roadshows around the country. We went to every country in the UK, talking to groups of female business owners and advocates about what their challenges were, what their achievements were as well, what were the things that had helped them most, but what were the barriers, particularly to growing their businesses. And all the information, the data we got out of that, with NatWest, we co-authored a white paper that went to government and influential corporates with all the recommendations that we'd picked up on the way about how to help women break down these barriers and have an easier path to grow their businesses. And you may have heard of the Rose Review of Female Entrepreneurship. This was 3 years ago. This was commissioned by the Treasury, and they commissioned NatWest to lead a review of female entrepreneurship, again to look at the barriers, but particularly on the financial side. And it was called the Rose Review because it was led by Alison Rose, who's the only female CEO among the leading high street banks. So she's a real ambassador for female entrepreneurs and for helping them to grow. But throughout all this work that I had been doing and had done for about 10 years, it became very clear that there was a complete dearth of gender disaggregated data. Masses of data and research on the SME sector as a whole, but no analysis of gender differences. And I worked with the Enterprise Research Centre at Aston University, with Warwick Business School, and collectively groups of us had met with the Treasury and HMRC to try and unlock this data. And really, to be honest, our progress was absolutely at snail's pace. Until in June 2020, through the Women in Enterprise group, I was introduced to John Cushing, who is the CEO and founder of M&A Tech. And through him, I discovered that this data platform can produce gender disaggregated data across the whole SME sector of over 7 million businesses. It really was a eureka moment, and not only for me, but for the significant number of women and men who had been with me on this quest to get this important data unlocked. The M&A platform is a source of rich data, and the company is committed to share with the female entrepreneurs and all the other stakeholders who support the growth of women-owned businesses. And so thus, TGI, the Gender Index, was founded in December 2020. It's a research study to establish the benchmark between female-owned and male-owned businesses right across the UK. And it will take the form of an interactive website that will be free at point of use. And everyone will be able to access in real time all the data that sits behind the gender index down to the level of anonymity. And that data will be analysed by gender, by nation, by region, by LEP, by local authority, across nearly 200 sectors, by size and age of business, by investment sources. And I give you an example, this is the one I always use, of a woman in Basildon who owns a nail shop, and it's been very successful, and she wants to grow her business. So does she open another nail shop in Basildon? Or does she open a nail shop in an adjoining area? Or does she own a tanning salon? Or does she open a beauty salon? Now, at the moment, it's a little bit finger in the wind to get the information she needs to make a good business decision. So she could go to the Chamber of Commerce, she could walk the streets, she could talk to a number of people. She can probably find silos of information that will take her time to discover that she can ill afford. With the gender index, she will be able to sit in front of her screen and get all that information at once in one place. So this will be revolutionary for women business owners. But it will also benefit a lot of other stakeholders as well. National government, for example. When the Rose Review reported, the government set a target to have another 600,000 female-owned businesses by 2030. And at the moment, they can't judge how much progress they're making towards that. They could possibly do a piece of research, but that would be static and it would be on a sample. But with the gender index, they'll be able to measure it month by month, what progress they're making towards that massive target. For local government, we're already working with a group of LEPs in the south of the country, and they're using the data to identify the female-owned businesses in their areas who are ripe for growth, but maybe need some support and don't know where to get it, so that the LEPs can see where to offer that support and point them in the direction of investors who are interested in their sector. And for investors themselves, this will be a rich source of measuring the impact of their investments and looking at investment opportunities that maybe they weren't aware of before. And we're talking right across the funding piece here. So we're talking to high street banks, private banks, angel investors, VCs, the whole gamut of investment is analysed within the data index. And for researchers, we're already working with leading business schools, Warwick for England, Strathclyde for Scotland, Queen's Belfast for Northern Ireland, and Cardiff for Wales. And they're doing the academic part of the research for their country. And then they will provide the narrative for that within the first issue of the Gender Index report. And we're talking to London Business School, and we're hoping to get them on board to do the overall UK narrative, because by having the business schools providing the narrative, it gives it integrity. And we do see this very much as a public sector, private sector, academia collaboration. For corporates, the gender index will be useful for them, looking at supply chains, how they're doing in their supply chains, how's the diversity level going up and down. And other organisations like the Federation of Small Businesses, Fund Her North, Women in Tech, Scale Up Institute, the list is endless. So the gender index will benefit all these stakeholders and the business media, because it would just give them instant information to write about. And we hope very much they will write about the gender index itself. So our aim is to publish in March 2022 to launch the interactive website, and there'll be a small printed digest that we will use as a teaser to lead people to the website. And then we shall publish regularly thereafter, showing trends and growth and impact. But all the data will be available in real time, live, for people to access it on the website. So it is a very exciting initiative. It's real time, live gender data at the click of a mouse. So I think you can see how this brings together my three passions of supporting women and small businesses, and the children who will be able to read and use the gender index when they open their own businesses in the future.